Hello everyone, welcome to Han's Garage. Right now you're looking at this 1999 e36 M3 and its manual transmission on the floor. And the reason why it's on the floor is because of this throwout bearing being completely destroyed, as you can see. Wow. And because of that, I wasn't able to disengage the clutch from the motor and shift into different gears. So right now this video is a tutorial video on how to take off the transmission. But before I get to the video, let me show you how bad the throwout bearing was inside the transmission and the symptom of a bad throwout bearing when you start the engine. As you can see, whenever I press the clutch pedal, you can hear the screeching noise because the throwout bearing is not spinning with the clutch. Alright, let's get started. So right now you are looking at a front subframe right underneath my floor jack, and I'm going to jack up the car as high as I can and then put jack stands underneath the car. Once you've secured the jack stands in place, lower your floor jack very slowly. Same thing for the back, jack up the rear subframe and place the jack stands. Alright, once you have your car up, the very first thing you have to do is removing your exhaust. But my exhaust bolts were way too rusted, so we had to take it to my friend's shop, and it took about 2 hours to torch all of them and take them off, in total 6 bolts. And I've made a separate video for this one, so if you're interested in watching it, I will put a link in the description box. After removing your exhaust, you have to remove your heat shield, and this is held on by 4 10mm bolts, and then we're going to take off the center subframe. Okay, so these are 13mm sockets. There's 1, 2, and then after we take this one off, there's another one here. So total in 6, 3 here, 3 here. And I'm using my impact gun to take them off. To take off the drive shaft from the transmission side, I've had to use my 18mm wrench on the back side and then my 18mm socket with the ratchet, and I was able to take the bolts off. And you notice there's only 1, 2, 3 on the drive shaft, and that's the only thing you have to take off, and it'll come off from the transmission. To take off the drive shaft from the rear differential side, there are 4 16mm bolts, and I've used my 16mm wrench, and I've held on to my drive shaft with my left hand and hammered the wrench from this side, and I was able to take off these bolts easily.
Alright, now we are going to take off the center bearing, and these are held on by two 13mm screws. Alright, so to remove your entire shifter, it's actually really easy. There's one pin right here, and then there's another pin right here. So obviously you're going to have to come from underneath because the transmission will be still attached to the car. So you can come up with a flathead screwdriver like this and get to this point and try to pry that up. And you will hear a click. And then you can even put your hand in there and try to take it out like this. And you have to just pull this pin out, kind of wedge it with your flathead screwdriver, and this should come out easily. And then this shifter link is free. And then there's another pin right here that you can easily come from underneath and then just pull it right up. Just like that. Then you can take this off. And then your shifter is free. Alright, so I'm going to remove the shift knob using a hex wrench. And I can freely spin this because it's loose from the transmission now. And I'm going to loosen the nut for the shift knob. And I will be able to pull it out straight. And then I can take off this boot just with my hands. And be careful not to lose the screw for your shift knob. Here. You can take off the boot. And let's go underneath to take off all the shifter. Okay, so the shifter should be completely free. And now we just have to take off this rubber boot by just pulling it off. And be careful not to rip it. And when you do, you can slide the shifter out. Just push it. And it should be off. And this will allow you to have more room over the transmission to get to those top screws of the transmission. Okay, right now I'm going to use my engine support bar for me to support the engine and lower the engine a little bit more so I have more space for me to access the transmission. And right now I'm going to hook the engine support bar onto the engine hook right here.
Once you have the engine support bar set up, we are going to take off the front X brace. And then to remove a sway bar, we have to remove 4 13mm bolts. Once the sway bar is out of the way, you can start to loosen up the front subframe bolts, and these are 18mm bolts. Notice how I didn't take off the front subframe all the way. This is for my own safety reasons. I didn't want the engine to fall on top of me, even though I had my engine support bar. But it actually gave me just enough room for me to take off the transmission. Alright, this is the final step before removing the torque screws of the transmission. We are removing 13mm bolts for the transmission mount, and I am supporting the transmission mount with my floor jack. Right now we're looking at a slave cylinder, and this is held on by two 13mm screws. Okay, now I'm going to explain how I got to my torque screws to take off the transmission. There's about 9 torque screws in total, and I've had to use multiple combination of extensions to get to where I needed to get to. And this is actually about 2 feet long, 2 feet and 2 inches long, and combination of 3/8 of an inch extensions, 3 inch, 6 inch, 8 inch, and then converter from 3/8 of an inch to 1/2 inch, 10-inch extension with 1/2 inch ratchet. So compared to my 3/8 of an inch ratchet, obviously the 1/2 inch ratchet gave me more leverage for me to easily take off the bolts. And right now I'm going to explain which bolts I took off first and different sizes. So let's get to it. Alright, so 2 of the first bolts I took off were these 2 right here, this one and this one, and they were E12 torque screws, E12 inverted torque screws, and they were actually very easy to take off. Okay, so I'm fishing for the middle one, and it's right there, and it's hooked. Okay. To get to these screws, I really thought this was going to be harder, but oh, wow. Got it. Here's the second one. And then I took off this one, which is E14, slightly bigger than the ones before we took off. And these 2 are E14. And the hardest screw to take off was that one. And this one is the longest, as you can see. It's E14 as well. And I've had to use a breaker bar to get this loose, and it took the longest for me to take off. And it's one of the longest. And there's 2 long ones like this, one here and one here, a little bit on the bottom side, which I'll get to right now. Alright, right now we are looking at the bottom portion of the transmission, and there are 3 E10 torque screws. They're the only 3 smallest on the bottom side.
And then another the last longest torque screw, which is E14. And that's it. And I was able to pull the transmission out and drop it with my floor jack, all by myself. Alright, all the 9 torque screws are out of the transmission, and now I'm going to pry out the transmission a little bit, maybe like an inch or inch and a half, because there is a metal gasket still around the transmission and it's held on by one 10mm screw, and you have to take this off in order for you to remove the transmission completely. I did it! Thank you guys for watching. Please stay tuned for more upcoming videos, and I'll see you guys next time.